When we change our mindsets, we can change our outcomes. Save our lives from sadness, depression, and anxiety, thus giving us the freedom to live the life we want. Hi, I'm Stuart Haskin, founder of getsafe, and your host of the Movement for Change podcast.
Hey, welcome back, podcasters. I have a guy on today I'd like to consider a friend. I'm not sure he considers me a friend, but it's my podcast, so who cares? Mike Zabarsky. He is a senior deputy in Ventura. He works with Special Olympics. He's on mental health teams, crisis intervention teams, so very well-rounded. So I'm looking forward to our chat today. See you soon.
Hi, I'm here today with Mike. You heard my intro. He's a senior deputy from Ventura. He had 17, 16, 18 years of retail experience?
21 years now in law enforcement.
Law enforcement, but in retail before your law enforcement.
Oh, 16 years in retail prior.
Yeah, which I think is amazing because I like the fact that you have community, civilian side, and then also the law enforcement side. I think Mike, as I said earlier, is one of our law enforcement and civilian trainers, and I feel he can connect with almost any audience, which is really nice because sometimes law enforcement has a little harder time connecting with civilians because they don't have any outside learned education. But yeah, super excited about Mike. This episode, we're talking about mental health, individuals with developmental disabilities, the dual diagnosis, intellectual disabilities. But yeah, I don't know. I like to start with your special ed work or Special Olympics work. How did you get involved and how long has it been? I feel like you've been doing it for a really long time.
Well, Stuart, that's a terrific question. And one of the principles when I first graduated the academy was that we learned that what we don't understand, we have a tendency to fear. Now, growing up, I didn't have very many friends and I had no family with any intellectual or developmental disabilities. So once I graduated the academy, went into the jail and started my law enforcement training in earnest, I received an email requesting officers to come out and do a Tip-A-Cop event. Well, I'd never done that before, and it was a great opportunity to interact with the public and learn a little more about the concept of Special Olympics. So I volunteered. I was the last one to volunteer, so they asked me to run a raffle for a Harley-Davidson motorcycle. And in about 4 hours, I sold $3,500 worth of raffle tickets. And they went, hey, this guy might be a good guy to steward along. No relation to you, Stuart, of course.
Yes, I was going, what? Where was I? Okay.
So I got sent to a Special Olympics International Conference, started meeting other law enforcement officers. And as my career has progressed, I started doing Tip-A-Cop events. I got my own event. I started representing the Ventura County Sheriff's Office and then became the law enforcement rep for Southern California for the Law Enforcement Torch Run, the single largest grassroots fundraising organization in the world. There's over 100,000 law enforcement officers involved with Special Olympics out of 173 countries. And I'm happy to report that after 40 years, this year, we have now surpassed the $1 billion mark in terms of donations for our Special Olympics community.
That is awesome. That's very awesome. And you got to run with the torch, correct?
I have run with the torch, actually not just in California. I've run it in Canada. I ran it in New Zealand, representing law enforcement in Southern California. I also, I believe it was 3 years ago, had the opportunity to run the original route in Wichita, Kansas, with 3 of the original 6 torch runners from 1985.
Wow. Yeah, I was going to mention I ran with the torch out here in Orange County, but I'm not going to do that anymore because it just sounds sad, my story. But that's pretty amazing. I mean, it's so amazing how you embrace that world, which is so needed because, as we all know, intellectual development disability individuals are the highest risk of victimization, sexual assault, violence, fraud, and it's great having that law enforcement presence there because they fear law enforcement because of the things they've seen on TV, maybe in their neighborhood. So having that badge with a smile humanizes it and, you create that connection.
What's really interesting, Stuart, is over the last 5 years ago, because part of what I do for a living as a senior deputy is I also instruct to law enforcement officers. But we've been teaching this concept that the uniform has a voice. And what's meant by that is that everyone has personal experiences, both positive and negative. They have family and friends who have positive and negative. There's modern media that shows law enforcement sometimes as being bumbling, corrupt, heavy-handed, uncaring, or unfeeling. And so when a law enforcement officer arrives, before they ever say a word, that uniform has a voice. And so what's really, really important is that my personal voice needs to be louder than the uniform itself. And with my retail background that you mentioned, I bring a customer service viewpoint, not only to how I police in this modern era, but also try to positively influence my peers and my subordinates to do the same.
Yeah. It is, they have learned experiences, which a lot of molds we have to break as well, where you connect, you make a connection, because the problem is when I'm in uniform, or when you're in uniform more, we live with past experiences. So if I had a bad officer engagement, now I'm going to carry that bias into all engagements with law enforcement. And like you said, I feel like when you walk in, and how you present yourself, how you introduce yourself, how your posture is, we talk about in our agency, you're communicating to create a connection, right? If you come in heavy-handed, your connection is going to be bad. You come in smiling. If the situation's right, it's going to create a better connection. So I applaud that.
Absolutely. And if anyone's ever taken a training with me, they're going to hear me say that when emotion goes up, intelligence goes down.
Yeah.
Think of any poor decision you've ever made. It is probably from an emotional level that was made quickly, where if you had just lowered the emotions a little bit, you might have made a better choice. And where that translates for Get Safe, and one of the strongest things possible, is that having that calm, steady approach goes 3/4 of the way to getting better outcomes in situations.
And I don't agree with it just because it gets safe, but my nature is the same thing. If I elevate, even in an argument, I start sounding like a bumbling idiot. I make no sense. I'm always clearer when I'm remain calm. That's where our breathing exercise comes in. We're not carrying our bad morning into a situation. It is, and it's like you said, the calm and steady approach. That means we're not slow motioning. We're just taking a beat, listening, thinking and processing, which we tend not to do when we're elevated. We just, our thinking gets red or black on the level of, not making sense and everything. So I agree completely.
Stuart, you bring up a fantastic point, and this is true whether you're a law enforcement officer, whether you're a caregiver, whether you're a mental health consumer. The very first thing for de-escalation in any situation is de-escalating yourself. If you're able to get your emotions at least part of the way under control, and you're making good decision making, then that allows the ability to find commonality, which is a great step towards gaining compliance and really working towards solving an issue, as opposed to wasting that time, energy, and emotion just trying to get to a baseline where we can start communicating.
Yeah, and it's funny. It Get Safe's foundational is we kind of teach the same message to every vast different population. So I was just thinking of the IDD population. We do the same thing. We teach them to breathe. We teach them to relax when they're trying to make a point. I have a friend, very smart, master's degree, has cerebral palsy. But when she gets elevated, nothing is clear. So we worked on just, breathing, put away the stress, the panic, and just communicate what you're trying to communicate. So these tools and lessons that we teach law enforcement apply to college kids that we teach. It applies to IDD. It applies to whatever groups we're working with. So yeah, the messages, which I like. I'm a simple guy. I like being able to have a same message that goes across, but it works the same. The less we elevate, the better we are. Have you seen any of that? I mean, so I want to get to, maybe we're going to go on a break in a moment, but I want to come back and just talk about some of your mental health experience in the field. Because I remember we had a class or something, then you came back and you already applied some of the stuff we had talked about. So, all right, let's take a quick break. Mike, don't go anywhere. We'll be back.
We want to talk to you about something important.
988 is a special number you can call
when you're going through a tough time, like a panic attack, really bad depression,
or when you're thinking about suicide.
It's like having a superhero in your pocket.
When a crisis intervention worker answers your call, they'll listen without judging you.
They'll ask about your crisis and offer resources that can help you, like counseling services, support groups, or other forms of assistance.
All contact with the 988 Lifeline from people seeking help are to be treated as confidential by the 988 Lifeline and its network centers.
This means that information about callers, chatters, or texters will not be shared outside of the 988 Lifeline without documented written or verbal consent from the people seeking help.
But
if they think there's an immediate danger, they can send out emergency responders.
your safety is their top priority. Remember though, 988 is only there when you really need help.
It's not for when you want to tell someone about your favorite movie.
Or need help with your homework.
Whether you're feeling anxious, sad, or overwhelmed,
988 is here for you.
Let's make a deal, okay?
the next time life feels too hard to handle alone,
Let's call 988.
because we're in this together, right?
Let's rock and roll.
You're
You're not alone.
Hey, welcome back. I got Mike here. Some super informative information. Let's keep going.
Stuart, that 988, that is one of the greatest things I've seen all over the country. The opportunity to call someone, no matter time of day, or even text, because let's face it, modern communication's moving more towards texting.
Yeah.
That 988 is fantastic for someone in crisis, but also looking for resources. And it's easy to remember, just like 911 for emergencies or 211 for information.
Yeah, and that commercial, which I believe you're referring to, is our PSA public service announcement that had individuals on the spectrum with autism that were the actors, that most of them were all first-time actors in front, and they killed it. But it's nice because we're going after that community, because that community has a high risk of anxiety, but no resources that they know of. And so I that's what we were building it for.
What's super important to remember is it doesn't matter who you are. You can be someone with an intellectual developmental disability and still have other things that are affecting you, like depression.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that those dual diagnoses, if you recognize that and can get the type of therapy and information and resources that you're looking for, there's no reason not to have a really productive life.
I agree. And that's the thing, knowing, I think what GetSafe started when we first started probably in 97, but in 2000, when we were starting to do a lot more individuals IDD, we fought a lot with people saying, oh, once you tell the individuals about this kind of stuff, they're going to have it. It's like, no, they're going to know there's a resource now and understand, why is my behavior, why do I sleep in so late some days? Why am I not motivated? Those are all points of anxiety or depression. All those things we can look at now because we're giving them the tools to self-evaluate and then look for resources. And I think that's the important part, because the group that we're talking about now is kind of unforgotten when it comes to, as many services and many outreaches as possible. And that's why I applaud what you're doing with Special Olympics. Those are things that group doesn't quite get as much as we hope they should.
Well, there's another aspect to it as well, is as healthier diet. You talk about the treatment triangle, right? Medications, diet, and therapy. So as our people who are born with autism, for example, as their diet improves, as they're being more socialized, more activities, they're living longer. And their caregivers, which are typically their parents, are also getting older. And so this information, the resources that we're providing are going to ensure they're successful long after their family caregivers move on, and they're able to have productive and exceptional lives because they've received the same services as anybody else is entitled to.
Yeah, the education, when we first started, they were eating McDonald's every day because of the cost pricing and different things. So we weren't trying to eliminate fast foods from it, but we created a healthy menu. If you get a chance, maybe choose the salad or the chicken sandwich over the cheeseburger. These are your choices. You make these. And yes, there's so many times I literally had this conversation 2 weeks ago when I went to, shadowing a one-on-one. We do one-on-one trainings for individuals with IDD, and the parent was there, and we talked. And I said, "Listen, our goal is to make your son, as independent as possible because you're going to age out. It's just the way life is, and we want to make sure." And that's what you want, right? Because we asked her, and she said, "Yeah, I want him to be able to live a life after I'm gone. And gone means gone, right?" So it's exactly what you said. We're giving more tools so they can continue their life because of not having their mom or parents or that one caregiver around, that they are learning to be independent. That's our ultimate goal, is so they can go to the movies without being harmed, so they can communicate, so they can eat right, like you said, take their meds properly. If they want therapy, could be exercise. Therapy could be a person they talk to. So yes, I agree with that, because that's our ultimate goal at Get Safe, right? Creating independence.
Absolutely. And you mentioned one key thing that really perked up my ear as a 21-year veteran of the sheriff's office. So as a law enforcement officer, when we talk about training, we mention having tools in the toolbox, meaning if you have all the tools, all the resources you're looking for, but you don't utilize them, for example, trying to build a house and not using a hammer,
Yeah.
you're not going to get the positive outcomes you're looking for. So, one of the tools that I really recommend for mental health consumers and caregivers is working with your local law enforcement. Many of them have received what's called CIT, or Crisis Intervention Team training. It's specialized training, 40 hours. So it's 5 days, 8 hours a day, where they meet mental health consumers, they meet caregivers, they meet organizations, they go through practical trainings, they learn about medication. And it's an education component. So if you're having a crisis situation and you're requesting law enforcement, remember to ask for a CIT trained officer. And this is important because if there isn't one available, they're going to look and see if there's any available nearby. And if there isn't, the more time you ask, the more it tells that agency that they need to start looking into that particular training. But it's value added for you. And that's something that we want to really emphasize, that law enforcement is here to make positive, lasting outcomes.
And I'll add one more component to that, is that when you're calling and asking, which is great information, CIT, they don't even have to remember what it stands for, but also front load dispatch, so they can front load the officer. Hey, my child has autism. My child hates loud noises, doesn't like to be touched. My child's 6 foot, 275 pounds, or 4 foot, 110 pounds. Whatever it is, the more information we can give to law enforcement as they come in, the safer everyone's going to be. And then also, we always say, as a parent or caregiver, guide the officers. This is your child, or this is your person that you're in care for. You know their behaviors. So make sure that there is more information up front to the dispatcher, to the law enforcement. So.
Stuart, that's one of the things that GetSafe is famous for. During a lot of our classes, like elopement prevention and response, there's a toolkit that's offered to caregivers and mental health consumers. And in that toolkit is a list of things that you can fill out ahead of time like medications, any diagnoses, triggers, de-escalation tactics that have worked before. If you write those things down ahead of time before a crisis situation, then all you simply have to do is call 911, call emergency dispatch, have that information already filled out ahead of time so that when the dispatcher asks you the question, you can provide the answer. And the reason being is the more informed and educated the responding officer is, the better and faster they can respond to your crises and immediately start trying to resolve the situation in a positive way.
And just for the audiences that are outside of California or even possibly international, use your emergency service number, but everything else applies. That you can ask. They may not know what CIT is even in your area. They may not know what it is, but at least what you said, be prepared, give that breakdown, because when you're in crisis, things don't come clearly, right? We get elevated. We just talked about that. You're not as clear, but if you have a script in front of you, because we have cases of, there was a police sergeant, his wife was having a heart attack. He panicked so much he couldn't even get out the information. And he's been in law enforcement for, I think it was like almost 30 years. So we get nervous at those times. So having a script is perfect, because it just keeps you know what to do right now. You know what to tell the operator, and you know what kind of information they need to know. So the interaction is safer, is what we want.
We've talked about a lot of things here, but I want to give, if I can, a quick nuts and bolts solution right away that can help you in a crisis situation. And that's something that we call either box breathing. It's had other terms like military breathing, tactical breathing. And it's referred to as 4-count breathing, where you breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, and hold your lungs empty for 4 seconds. What this does is it kind of resets you. Think of the old Looney Tunes cartoons where Wile E. Coyote goes off a cliff, and motion without actually doing anything does not help. So taking that second to tactically pause, to get your head in a good position so that you can make better decisions moving forward. I just wanted to offer that as an opportunity for people to take that brief moment, collect yourself so that you can move forward with a purpose.
Yes, I agree. And the reason why there are so many different names is because they use it in colleges for testing. They use it in the military for deployment. They use it in law enforcement when you're going out and trying to de-escalate after a busy night. So it's for everyone. But with that said, I'm glad you wrapped up with a nice 4-parter, because that is the end of our time right now. But I definitely want to have you back when we have a little more time. So Mike, I want to thank you. You want to close with anything?
Just keep working, Stuart, towards making better outcomes. And I applaud everyone watching this podcast because you're taking a little bit of time out of your day to try to make your situation a little bit better. And what else could we ask for than just trying to make things a little better than they were yesterday?
Yep. To change the mindsets, to change the outcomes. And that's why this podcast is Movement for Change. We're always trying to elevate and change. So thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Mike. Always a pleasure. Take care. And that's it. Bye. Thank you for tuning in to our podcast, Movement for Change. We hope that our discussion has left you with new perspectives and insights that can help you change mindsets and save lives. Please visit us at getsafeusa.com for resources, trainings, and if there's a topic you want to hear about or you have questions, please email us at info@getsafeusa.com. Together, we can make the change we want to see.